people who are high on need for cognitive closure. For people who are still willing to entertain different opinions and to learn from other people, these are people who are low in need for cognitive closure. They do not need to close too fast. So we have a theory about open-minded and closed-mindedness, and it is an individual trait-like differences. And using this, we are able to construct a mechanism that essentially prescribes how do people engage in conversations. Are you willing to talk to people? Who do you talk to? And what do you talk about? Do you want to talk about your own topic or your friend's topic? And then how does it influence? So need for cognitive closure, existing empirical research do give us enough information, empirical support to build on these various small chains. So our study aim in a modeling form is a theoretical exposition examining how will majority opinion spread in a high versus low need for cognitive closure dominant society. You know, most of the time we assume that if a topic is the majority topic, it will continue to exist, and in fact, it will perpetuate. You know, more people would, because if you talk to more people holding the majority opinion, there will be a majority advantage. So our question here is, will there be an increase in popularity for the majority opinions in a high versus low cognitive closure society? And what is the speed of increase? And the next question is that, now what happens if within a society, the majority opinions and minority opinions are differentially dominated by high versus low need for cognitive closure agents? In other words, some are more open-minded, some are more closed-minded. How would it affect the popularity changes and the speed of change and dynamics? So a very quick run through our model. So our model over here, we have 161 agents and they are updated in a concurrent manner. In other words, the way we code it is such that they will talk to each other concurrently. So a typical agent at the beginning of the simulation will start off with being assigned one or two topics. That means we'll assign whether are you higher in higher preference for topic A or higher preference for topic B. And we will assign them one of five different openness, open and closed-mindedness level. So instead of open and closed-minded, we try to simulate the real world and we use a beta distribution for this. So we have high need for cognitive closure, moderately high, middle, moderately low, and low need for cognitive closure, five different levels. So based on this, we will determine their advocacy. At this point in time, are they advocating more for topic A or are they advocating more for topic B? And we also determine their need for cognitive closure stage. So within the tier of need for cognitive closure, we have a stage called the seizing stage, whereby agents will seize on information and agents will form opinions whereby they freeze and they are not willing to entertain other topics. So based on the difference, we will calculate the need for cognitive stage. Then each agent will calculate a list of neighbors' advocacy. They'll find out who is advocating. Their friends who is advocating for Trump, for instance, and who is advocating for Biden. And then they will decide, okay, whether they are willing to talk. It could be that, you know, because they are high need for cognitive closure, they don't feel like talking because I form my opinion. But perhaps they may feel probabilistically they want to talk. But if they want to talk, they only want to talk to friends who are having similar opinions. So there's a high need for cognitive closure people. Now, low need for cognitive closure, they may say, well, I'm willing to talk to people and who are of a different opinion to me. So this particular stage is where the agents decide who to talk to, what to talk about. Yeah. And based on what they talk about, there will be a mutual influence. That means the more they talk about a topic, that we will increase their preference, their attitude strength towards that topic. So I'm just going to skip over this. And just briefly, just for the sake of visuals, this is the user interface of the program that we are using. As you can, so it is 161 agents that we are seeing. Let me just jump straight to experiment 1. So experiment 1, we are trying to compare high need for cognitive closure societies with low need for cognitive closure societies. So to balance realism and tractability, we have 5 levels of need for cognitive closure, and we approximate a beta distribution. So in other words, it looks like this. So on the top, you will notice that we have this, there's this square box. So we have the proportion of need for cognitive closure for topic A, and at the bottom is for topic B. So you'll notice that the shape of the distribution is similar, and it is designed for this case because we are not having any bias distribution. The distribution is stochastically the same. So the slight differences are due to stochastic differences. So when we, for this simulation, we run 200 runs per combinations, and we have several combinations in order to give us the results. So our results find that in the high need for cognitive closure society, as expected, the majority topic gets more popular. However, the system stabilized pretty fast. One of the reasons when we look back at our simulation, the reason is because the high need for cognitive closure people, they are satisfied with their opinions. They are not willing to talk as much. And so they freeze and the system evolution stops. And in a high need for cognitive closure society, there are more independent opinion holders. That means people are not surrounded by other friends or neighbors who share the same opinions because they are not willing to influence their surrounding neighbors. They are fine just freezing on their own opinions. Now, for low need for cognitive closure society, that means people are open-minded. Now, this is where it gets interesting because the majority topic loses popularity. So counter to what we would expect that the majority topic gets to spread their popularity, in open-minded society, the majority topic loses popularity just slightly. And because the agents are willing to listen and spread and talk more, so the system evolves much more slowly and it takes a longer time to stabilize. But in its end state, there are more agents who have people sharing similar opinions amongst themselves. So this is the first result of experiment 1, and experiment 1 already shows us something interesting is that under certain conditions, the majority advantage will not exist. So then we go to experiment 2, which try to spice things up a little bit. Now we are saying that we have 2 topics, but what happens in the first condition, we have high need for cognitive closure topic to be the minority, and the open-minded low need for cognitive closure people to be the majority. And then we also have second conditions whereby people are equal on par, and we also have close-minded people who are majority, open-minded who are the minority. And the situation is set up quite similarly the same. And we can see from here it is a bias distribution. So for instance, in the first case, topic A, which is high need for cognitive closure, is the minority. We have only 181 agents at its maximum versus the low need for cognitive closure topics, which is the majority. So under this situation, we simulate, and these are some of the results that we gotten. So when the majority topic are dominated by people who are close-minded, there will be, I will call this a very, very large increase, almost a 20% increase in popularity when the simulation ends. But it takes a longer time to stabilize, which is very surprising to us, because in the first simulation, we find that in a pure society where high need for cognitive closure is the dominant state, the system stabilizes quite fast. But in our case, when there's a bias distribution, the system takes a way much longer time to stabilize. So this is the first result that we find, which is to be expected. Now, when we go to the 50-50, that means open-minded and closed-minded are equally distributed between high need for cognitive closure, high for topic A and topic B. What we find is that the topic that has high need for cognitive closure will enjoy an increase in popularity. The topic which has low need for cognitive closure will have a reduction in popularity, which is kind of intuitive because the low need for cognitive closure, open-minded people are willing to listen to other people and even consider changing. So that kind of makes sense as well. But when we go to the majority topic, so if a topic is a majority topic, starting off at 75%, huge majority, but this topic is dominated by people who are very open-minded. Now, when they are open-minded, what happens is that even though they are majority topic, you will see a decrease in popularity. So to some extent, experiment 2 validates the finding in experiment 1, but shows the different conditions whereby specifically in the 50-50 situation, the one that has open-minded people will reduce in popularity, and also in the high need for cognitive closure do offers what we call this need for cognitive closure advantage. That is, if your topic is dominated by people who are close-minded, your topic will increase popularity when at majority or on par. Now, suppose your topic is a minority. So close-minded people are the minorities. When the simulation ends, the reduction in popularity loss is very minor, it's very little. So need for cognitive closure advantage will give the topic, will help them to increase in popularity and also reduce the loss in popularity when they are the minority. Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, because I received a message. All right. So to sum up, the insights that we get is that in in an unbiased distribution, high need for cognitive closure societies, popularity of majority opinions will increase. In low need for cognitive closure societies, where people are open-minded, majority opinions will decrease. In other words, if you are holding the majority opinion in a low need for cognitive closure society, it is difficult for you to hold on to the advantage. So this is the first insight. Now, in a biased distribution, when the in biased distribution, when a topic is dominated by close-minded people, they will increase in popularity over time. However, if they are minority, they will decrease only marginally. So, in terms of the real-world implications, it means that in terms of the real-world implication, it means that if you want to target certain demographic groups to be the influencers in your network, influencers to spread your opinion, your topic, the brand or increase your market share, the best way is to target people who are close-minded. And once you target them long enough, such that they hold on to their opinions, your topic will enjoy the high need for cognitive closure advantage. In essence of time, I'm just closing up here, just to keep within the 15 minutes. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. So in essence of time, I'm ending here, just to be mindful of the time.
Wait, is that working? The screen, is that working?
Yeah, yes, I can see you. Okay. You can use the share screen. Do you have PPT?
Is it not working already? Hang on.
No. You need to.
How's that?
Okay, now I can see it. Yes.
Okay. All right. Let me just get settled because I got this message at the bottom here. I think Professor Pang also got the message. It's joining group 1, but I guess that's just a false message. Yeah. Right. Let me briefly introduce myself. I'm a practice academic, which means my perspective is to really look at the concepts of academic research and work from the academic field and relate them back to my 30+ years of experience as a public sector leader. Now, mid-career, around about 20 years ago, I did the sort of academic study you need to be an academic, but I was still working. And I took on the academic study partly because I was in the Hong Kong police, and the Hong Kong police had undergone some form of transformational change in its performance management systems as a consequence of new public management. And as an operational leader at the time,
Hi, Graham. Graham, you're in mute. You're muted. We cannot hear you. I think you have a poor connection. Maybe you want to switch off the camera because your connection is not working.
Me at all at any point?
No, for the last 2 minutes we couldn't hear you at all, and also your camera is frozen at times. So maybe you have to switch off your camera.
Okay, so I've switched the camera off now, so you don't have to worry about my look.
We loved your look.
I'll go back.
We love your look. The only thing is we cannot see you.
The close to the start. I was an operational leader, and but a transformation. And so I was called in as an internal management consultant in order to try and put it back on track. Now, what I did was I started to look at the theories, the academic theories at the time, because I'd studied these things. So these were sort of performance management systems, such as management by objectives, management by results, total quality management, all these kind of statistical process controls. And new public management was quite similar in a concept. So this sort of narrow top-down alignment of performance measures. Now, in the 1990s, of course, we had things like the balanced scorecard, which was a bit top-down, a bit bottom-up, a wider range of perspectives, some harder to measure kind of performance measurements, but there was still this logical causal chain between actions and response. So we looked at learning and growth, and then how learning and growth feeds internal processes, and then how good internal processes feed the customer, the public kind of perceptions, and then how that leads outcomes for a police force to looking at things like crime rates. But these were all still these kind of rational mechanistic approaches of objectives, measures, targets, A balanced scorecard had initiatives supporting those kind of targets, but there was all this mechanistic alignment, and we still have these today with objectives and key results, OKR. It's the big Googles of this world are still using these kind of measurable goals and targets, and they're accounting for the gaps between target performance and actual performance, and then getting incentives to achieve closure of those gaps. But these all lead to unintended consequences. They ignore the performance that's not covered by performance indicators. They concentrate on the measure, not necessarily the underlying issue. There's bias, there's gaming, and even with bottom-up performance measurement design, you get bottom-up involvement in the design process. There's an overwhelming end response of dissatisfaction that the front line is not really in control of what they're being measured on. Some of it's irrelevant, and what they should be doing isn't being measured. So at the time, I was drawn to the work of Henry Mintzberg and his work on emergent strategies, and Brian Quinn on the logical incrementalism. And as a result of their influence, I redesigned the performance management processes to embrace their concepts. And what I was really trying to do was design a system that could operate under what I now know is the complexity of the situation. I didn't realize at the time, it was a relatively new concept, was this complexity theory coming into organizational management. So let me just touch on complexity theory, just in case people aren't that clear on it. There are many, many different approaches, different thinking about complexity theory. There's this is a particular theory, particular concept, but every complexity theory concept pretty much ends up with three primary domains for situations: an ordered domain, a complex domain, and a chaotic domain. And here I've got two dimensions of volatility, which includes the dynamism of a situation and how hostile that situation is. And then you've got complexity, which is the relative number of interactions and the complexity of interactions. Now, in an ordered situation, the complexity is within the organization's cognitive capacity, and the volatility is within adaptive capacity. So this is a kind of strong, structured and clear situation. You've got familiar patterns of events, the cause and effect relationships you can determine, they're linear, they're predictable, and you've got some sort of expected uncertainties, but they're known unknowns, you know them. This is really where performance management fits. In a complex context, it's different. Here, the complexity exceeds our ability to understand it, our cognitive capacity. But the volatility is still within our stride. We can take things in our stride. This is a weak, less structured, ambiguous situation. You have emergent patterns of events. There's self-organization, but you don't know why. And the cause and effect relationships are non-linear and unpredictable. There are unexpected uncertainties, unknown unknowns. Now, the chaotic context is clearly not stable. It's beyond our adaptive capacity in terms of volatility. There's dynamism, disorder, confusion, and hostility. So all the traditional performance measurement systems, and I will say, all of the traditional research methods used by academics are in the ordered context and not so well suited to the complexity of the real world. And this even 15 years ago, we were starting to see this VUCA, the volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity coming in. So what do we do? And again, this is me looking back at what we did and interpreting it from today's understanding. Okay, it's like a retrospective correlation. I'm not trying to prove anything here. But our design was aimed at this embracing of both a deliberate strategy and emergent strategies that happen, and using a logical incremental approach, at least an incremental approach. Now, what we did was we enabled a dual system for performance management with local interpretations of the global performance management system as a disjointed alignment. Key performance indicators were reported, but it was accepted that there was this relevance gap at a local level. Local frontline priorities were disjointed from the organizational priorities. And this is sort of against all the management consultancy stuff of the 80s and 90s. Now, we had no specific targets. There were implications that everyone would hope for incremental improvements, but the targets were not specific. Here I've shown 3 levels, frontline, middle and senior, but in reality it went beyond those levels. It's more for illustration than anything. And with these complex emergent pattern of events being interpreted at each level and communicated in this dual system of ordered and complex reporting. Now, how was that achieved? Now, every working morning, which was either 5 or 6 mornings a week, part 1 of the dual system was to receive a written report of the previous 24 hours performance events relating to these global key performance indicators and local priorities, local activity performance indicators. Now, these were ordered, quantitative and categorized reports on performance. They really past oriented. We're looking at what's happened in the past and what's traditionally been measured in the past, but they were very clear results. They were logically expected patterns with increases or decreases, and they were totally understandable. But part 2 was to receive a series of face-to-face and telephone, in those days telephone because we didn't have Zoom, verbal briefings to describe each incident as it was reported by different leaders. And this was sort of a qualitative narrative type of approach where it was very much a present orientation aiming at what would be the best immediate response. So we were totally, I was a commander at the time, going back out as a commander in charge of about 1,000 people. I was looking for weak signals and emergent patterns before they really emerged. I was trying to look for the tiny signals that I could deal with. And this came from the emphasis or the emphases in people's voice, their wording choice. And we were able to reinterpret the actual statistics of the performance management system and look for these weak signals. If there were positive weak signals, we could reinforce them, try to. If there were negative weak signals, we could try and deal with them immediately. And we also looked at these emergent patterns. Now, they wouldn't come up on the performance management system, but we try to make sense of those patterns and then respond at a local level. Now, in a complex system, you've got unpredictable causation. So we were just trying to work things out locally. So you might try the established procedures, but already they're probably not working. And we just try other actions. These are not policy, but they're not against policy either. And the key thing was not being accountable if it didn't work. So you were safe to fail. You could try something. If it failed, it would be fine. No one would worry about it too much. And especially if it's not formally reported on paper. We had plenty of failed attempts, but you move on and you try another thing. You try again because it's a complex system. You can't predict the future. You don't have causality that is clear in advance. Now, this was not part of the formal management system, but it was part of the overall concept. So in a complex environment, you're trying to manage the response strategies rather than performance in a traditional sense. And in an ordered performance management system, you're trying to manage the performance to a plan. Just out of interest, in a chaotic system, it really is a matter of managing the principles in line with the propensity. But that's not the key to this presentation. So emergent patterns and weak signals were passed up the chain through these narrative briefings. So I would brief my boss who had 5,000 people under his command, and he would brief his boss who had 25,000 people under his command. But it was accepted that these are not things that we're going to be checked on. And then our innovation, our creative strategies to address any issues that were addressing weak signals and not quite formed patterns yet, they were encouraged rather than dictated. And if approaches did work, then they were sort of create a pattern at a higher level that someone would say, okay, you have a go at this, try that because it's working somewhere else. It may not work for you, but it's working somewhere else. And by dealing with these complex events as they emerged, rather than waiting for them to emerge and be established on the reporting system, meant that we could deal with them. In effect, we weren't really managing performance in a complex system, we were managing our response. So just to wrap up, what actually happened, this is our key performance indicator, it's actually the overall crime rate for Hong Kong between 1988 and 2018. I retired in 2018, so That's where I end my involvement. But the key performance indicator, the lower the better, is the broad one here. You can see between 1988 and about 1995, there was this traditional performance management system, which was to leave people be, let them deal with it themselves. And actually, the ups and downs are a bit chaotic. And I suspect this is, again, I'm not trying to prove causation, but I suspect this is because it's not a responsive control system to just wait for the reports to come through. Then after about 1995, new public management came in, and you got an immediate improvement in Hong Kong, but that was 1997. There could be many reasons for that. And then a deterioration where the loss of confidence in that system was quite severe. Then there was a short period to reboot where they tried a couple of things. And then about 2006, that's when I joined, and other people joined the management consultancy internally. And we went on and we introduced this incremental sort of disjointed approach. And you can see, and I'm going to emphasize, I'm not trying to rewrite history, if you like. These are the results, and these were what happened. And you can see that actually being responsive at an immediate level and dealing with the complexity of a situation before it grows seemed to have a smoothing effect over performance. Now, we didn't worry about the annual performance until the annual time came round. We didn't worry about the 3-monthly performance until the 3-monthly performance came round. But every day we worried about those emerging patterns. So I think that's sort of the result of our action. Interested in what other people think.
Okay, so thanks for the presentation. Our last speaker for session 1 is Charles. Charles is from Singapore. He's also a consultant. He used to work in the university and then advised the government. Yeah.
Okay, over to me. Yeah, hi everyone. Good afternoon from Singapore, down south. So I'm Charles. Actually, I was a 2-decade bureaucrat, but I was also doing my PhD concurrently. So my PhD was in public policy. Later on, I also did my DBA looking at corporate strategy, more in the sustainability side. So for the past 2 years, I've been running my own tri-sector consultancy consortium. We try to solve what I call more complex problems that require you to understand governments, corporates, and nonprofits. All 3 sectors do not quite understand each other. So the more they don't understand, the more we have some business to do. Yeah. So we kind of always operate in the intermediary and also try to solve, I would say, more complex problems that actually requires you to understand how the 3 sectors work. I think in public policy, I think this is a public policy conference, we always look at regulations, incentives, and sermons, so to speak, right? So interestingly, I think all 3 sectors do represent quite sharply. Governments is only governments that can regulate. And actually, we talk about incentivization, tons of incentivization, but a lot of MNCs have more assets than governments. So a lot of complex problems could be solved if we take a polycentricity kind of perspective. And we talk about sermons and all, as much as governments like to moralize certain issues, etc. We all know in many countries that the media will pander to whatever non-profits say because they do not quite have so-called personal interests or other interests to speak about in a certain sense. So that's how we try to kind of understand it. And because of, I would say, different influences, what makes a particular sector tick would be quite different. So let's say in most countries, when we talk about a government having a slightly heavier hand, they want to say, oh, I want to help drive the economy, whether is it flying geese model, Japan style, Four Tigers style, where it's a bit more state interventionist kind of economy development. You would then say in today's economy, it might not work as much because the small medium enterprises, they may not want to listen to the government's direction, and government will be talking down in a certain sense of, oh, you should be doing this, you should be doing this and that. But they are not quite seeing from the government SME's perspective, what is my financial bottom line? Should I regionalize or should I focus on what's good for my current bottom line now, for example? Similarly, I think one of the more complex problems is actually the non-profit sector. They neither have the power nor the money, but yet they have a lot of business doing good work. But a lot of them are stuck with manpower issues, volunteerism, permanent staff, or even financial sustainability. So those are things that where we come in a certain sense. I don't want to share too much because I think there will be interesting questions in the Q&A. But what I thought I wanted to share is that if we rethink where did management consultancies first started, we're going to rewind back to the 1930s, right? In the 1930s, there were only 3 bodies. I think 2 are still in existence. One was McKinsey. Second one was Tutsuf, right? Which focused very much on industrial engineering, right? Those are the kind of 2 or 3 big associations in the United States looking at management consultancy. And McKinsey himself, he was a Chicago B School professor in the morning. He does consulting in the afternoon, right? So that's where I thought the real genesis. Obviously, we do have academic consultants along the way. Michael Porter's Monitor, you have Blue Ocean Strategy doing a little bit work here and there. But I suspect in the real mainstream consultancy, when they try to scale up, the situation is different, right? You no longer, it's harder to get a professor who is both good at the kind of theory part as well as practice part, right? And then nowadays, like it or not, the professionalization of the academia career means that you publish or you perish. So there's always an opportunity cost if you want to do consulting work or you want to publish and get your tenure, right? So most professors who actually get to do consulting are when they reach tenure, and universities can't fire you off, right? But because of professionalization, also we do see that sometimes, publishing has a particular certain mindset, right? Yet for professors, you are required to teach is a different mindset. And when you do consulting, etc., it's a totally different mindset as well. But I always sincerely believe that, professors, we are paid to think, right? You're paid to think, paid to do research, etc. And you have that time and long-term horizon to actually look at things, right? That I would say practitioners who are fighting current fire, always in the operating current ops mode, might not have the luxury to kind of think and dream, right? Therefore, I think there's that gap there. The market, because of the immediacy of they want this, they want that, etc., they will go to your McKinsey, whatever, pay them 2 more zeros behind. But then the funny thing is your McKinseys, your BCGs, etc., will then subcon out to professors and say, hey, can you do this for me? And then I drop 2 or 3 zeros, At the end of the day, who is doing the work? We lah. So I decided to say, okay, why don't I turn the other way around, right? I form our own mini McKinsey, right? Very heavy on, I would say, I definitely have more PhDs by ratio than McKinsey, right? And then we try to go direct to the client, so to speak, and then drop 2 zeros, and maybe we find our own way, right? At the end of the day, I think it's about being saying truth to power, and also being truthful to whatever we have studied or researched upon, and being able to close that loop back to the impact, to that groundwork. That's what drives me and my folks going. My folks are a weird bunch in a certain sense. They have their PhDs, but they are in practitioner world. Occasionally, they still teach at adjunct faculty, etc. I do teach at adjunct faculty. I'm at NUS, NTU, SMU, and St. Garland, but I do not teach the 101s. I only teach the 3000s, 4000s masters, applied problem solving modules, which requires them to kind of, for me to skill them in particular strategy innovation, bring them to real clients, whether it's nonprofits, governments, or SMEs, etc. Look at their problems, dissect it, and apply as much theory and practice together. So it's kind of tightening that gap in a certain sense. So I think I kind of occupy that niche area. I think Li Wei was very kind to kind of use the strategy, wisdom, skills thing as part of my talk. I won't talk too much about it, but that's what I'm personally interested in. And I've recently been named, I'm the founding editor for Rowledge series for strategy, wisdom, and skills. That's where I strongly believe that there will be 3 sources of books that I could kind of curate from professors who know the field a lot, from practitioners who also have sufficient academic rigor in their PhD or whatever, yet they're in the practitioner world. They still see certain things from a practitioner wisdom perspective. Yet you have people who dabble across interdisciplines. You have 1 or more disciplines at the edges is actually where most innovations are, right? You talk about behavioral revolution in psychology coming to social sciences, etc. Right? You just name it. We are always at that edge in that certain sense. And I think fields like public policy or international affairs we are always, because of interdisciplinary manner, being able to kind of co-curate that kind of cutting edge topics and all. Sustainable development is interesting because as much as World Economic Forum, etc., wants to talk about it, it's very much at the advocacy champion stage. It's not at the practical doing stage, because they have not quite solved how do I ensure sustainability yet affordably for consumers, profitability for the business they're running it. There's a nice tight sweet spot there. But it's useful to do as publicity and branding that you are sustainable, etc. Talk about ESG, etc. Everyone has to do it because you are a listed company and you need it by law. But how many really do it because it's good for business? How many have found the right profit formula, etc. to do it, right? So that's the kind of stuff that we try to dabble on when we have a kind of, I would say, real cases when we do consulting work. Yep, that's it from me. Just back to Li Wei.
Okay, thanks, Charles. Yes, Charles is now getting a contract from Routledge to be a chief editor of series. I think it's quite relevant for our today's webinar. So yeah, I will share through this chat function, send you the PDF about this book series. So we can later on discuss if any presenters today in this session and the other two sessions would like to join us to edit a book maybe about sustainability and government performance and or government reforms. I think thanks very much. So now Q&A time. Any questions from our audience or presenters? You can ask questions each other, have some discussions. Yes. No? No questions? Yeah, I actually have a question for each of the presenters for session one. The first question, Salvador, yes, I was a bit late. Sorry about that. Your presentation about Chile's reform is very important. And you introduced us the political background of Chile's reforms. So what do you think the way forward? I mean, the political leadership definitely is very important. Then, you know, for bureaucrats, for civil servants, if without the leadership, even if they have this will, they cannot reform, right? So, what do you think of this? In Chile's context, and also for international relations, because in Latin American politics, I think United States plays a very important role. And now United States has a new president. What's your take on this?
Okay, I mean, I think I'm going to refer to the performance management and to the target system, which is I was referring to in the case of the Chilean government. And that is also, for instance, we have the same approach in Indonesia, in Malaysia, and in other countries that they say, you know, we are going to have goals and very specific targets for those goals with very concrete performance indicators, many of them outcome or output related, so which are relevant for the citizens. So I think I have three opinions on this, the first one. So we know that we need performance management system because we can focus our strategies towards the things that we want to achieve. However, from the political level, when we do that, we narrow down the things that we want to achieve too much. So then it boils down that we get down what we measure, but what we cannot measure, what is not on the spotlight, we don't focus on it. So meaning that you are going to get the best test results in education does not necessarily mean that you're going to have the best education, because you're ignoring other areas of education that you cannot measure, like art, like some linguistic skills or whatever you want to mention. So that is one point. So it is not bad to have targets and performance objectives that are measurable, and then you can show how you progress towards them. It gives you focus and it gives you strategy. Okay, so that is one point that we have to be aware of. So the second point is that, so Graham was talking about before the balanced scorecard. And then there are many different type of instruments that are doing the same, that are reducing complexity too much. And they are trying to find ways in which they show how the organization is progressing towards different dimensions of what it has to be achieved. In a big system, so I'm working now with the Peruvian government on developing a monitoring system of the things that are relevant for the government. In these systems, I think what we need to have is narratives, right? So complexity is about finding the right narratives in which you can explain how organizations, how the government, how ministries can progress to some overarching goals that are relevant for a multiplicity of stakeholders. Because I'm talking about government, I'm not talking about firms, right? So in that sense, it is not so relevant targets as to have the narratives in which you find yourself in your ministry, in your agency, that you're going to a direction that at that point is relevant. For instance, we're talking about the quality of regulation. So the quality of regulation, when they try to improve the regulations of a particular country, they can focus on not having a negative impact on the competition among private firms and private individuals. You can have a focus on compliance, so people should comply with the regulation. You can have a focus on safety, environmental safety, social safety, whatever safety. But you cannot achieve the three of them at the same time if you're starting. So for instance, I say to the Peruvian government, focus on compliance because you have a problem on compliance. That doesn't mean that you're going to ignore the rest, but at least try to make a focus. So then if you have a focus on compliance and you cascade down everything that you want to achieve from compliance up until the activities, the critical activities that you want to do, that would be a different story. So governments do not need, in my opinion, to have a sophisticated target system. What they need to have narratives for each one of the sectors and to move independently. And the third point here is that to what extent do we want to have highly technocratic governments playing against political loving institutions in which you have to juggle with different stakeholders' interests? So I'm not quite sure if that pays off. So what I'm trying to do with that evaluation that we did on the field, and with the other evaluation that has been done only in the UK, as far as I know, is that might not pay off in the way they presumed they would do. Still, interesting enough, in the UK, I can't remember exactly, maybe Graham, you can remember that. You're from the UK, right? So I can't remember who dismantled the target regime, but then still the bureaucrats, the civil servants at the local level, because that was implemented by the Labour government of Tony Blair, and I believe that a part of it was continued by Gordon Brown. Still the civil servants said, you know what, even if you dismantle the system, we still want to use it to measure what we do. So I think that there should be here something like a connection between high-level political goals that you want to achieve, narratives to go there, measure things that are relevant to you, and leave targets, comparisons, and rankings for internal consumption of the civil servants that who have to operate the system, for organizations that want to learn from each other. So, I mean, I know that it sounds very prescriptive, but in line with Charles' suggestion, I think in the academia, we need to do research to inform what reality could be doing probably in a different way. I'm not saying better, because if we knew that it could be better, then I mean, probably I would be loading in money, right? Floating in money, sorry. But that is a short answer. About the US, I have no idea what to say, to be honest. That is question mark, because I think there is high expectations from everyone that Biden is going to do it differently. But to be honest, he's as nationalist as Donald Trump is. So American First is framed by Biden in a different way. In his whole political campaign, he has not mentioned that he's going to work with particular allies from other parts. So he's going against China. He's counting on the allies, but Europe doesn't count. He's not mentioning it. So let's see what happens. So I'm sorry, I'm not so, I mean, I'm optimistic about the values that he brings to the US. And I think nowadays, as an Earth citizen, we should be entitled to vote in the American elections. Unfortunately, we have to just watch it. But that is what I can say.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. A question for.
Can I just
yes.
can I just jump on 2 points from Salvador's interesting sharing? Yeah.
Yes, sure.
So I researched on US China for my first PhD, and on pragmatism, and my conclusion is every US president since Gerald Ford will come in with a campaign speech that bashes China. Yeah, and as short as a few weeks to maybe 18 months, they will be realistic and try to work with China in one way or the other, but still continue to have a dagger behind to poke them if you need to. Yeah, yeah. I guess the difference is really when you do not have classified intelligence, you read anything from newspaper, and you just need an enemy to make you feel good. Yeah, as a US president to be, and then when you come in and say, hey, look like market share, etc., looks like I cannot quite chop them off. Without hurting myself, etc., complex interdependence, and okay, let's find a way to work together. So I think that's the geopolitical.
And only to add to that, normally it's a good idea to have an enemy which is far away, because if it is your neighbor, it's not a good idea, because then you can clash very often.
Yes. Enemy is your friend, right? So there's always a neighborly kind of relationship, etc. Yeah, and then the second point is actually your first part, which I thought was very interesting. Because I think, well, in academia, we learn different frameworks. Practitioners or bureaucrats, etc., just take whichever they last learned, the last book they read. So if they last attended university in 80s, yeah, then there's 80s paradigm, 90s, 2000s, blah, 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 right? But as we kind of always swim in the theories and frameworks, we have gone from the traditional public admin, new public management, complexity, governance, all the way to where we are today, right? And with that also we think about polycentricity, etc. Because I mean we are paid to think and dream, right? Right. So the interesting part is separately, management consultancy also have their own frameworks, right? So I think what you mentioned is got me thinking, because you have then on the one hand systems thinking type, you have your Oxford scenario planning type playing across with time. System thinking is the very traditional engineering way, J. Forrester, John Sturman to Peter Senge, B School type, etc. And then public management, we talk about the public management. NPM essentially is taking free market principles and use it to check the fat bureaucracy, right? So you are talking about deregulation, use market principles, use that to perform, so performance management, KPIs, etc. So when you talk about KPIs in a very siloed manner, that's what you are seeing now. Right? When we go silo verticals, we do not see the horizontal integration in a certain sense. So we are not longer seeing things in ecosystem, that so-called complexity theories will then see how do I interact. Some things in the education will spill over to the economic side, for example, if you don't do well, etc. Right? So a corollary to that, actually, then it's also a case of in the management. The latest one that we are seeing is like Google, for example, right? So you have balanced scorecard, but balanced scorecard, unfortunately, he has become a top-down tool of communication. The bosses have decided this is the plan, yeah? Execute it and tell me each department how you're going to execute my grand plan. Even though it started off as a bottom-up, every level do their plans and then go upwards, decide, and then you cascade down for communication. But I think somehow they truncated it because it's bureaucrat, right? The top, whatever top says better, etc. But then what I thought was useful was the Google, when they talk about OKR, objectives, key results, etc. That has driven the private sector pretty well, at least it's Google, right? The question is, I thought, what is that scope to then see how we can transfer some of these things that in the business world to the public sector in a certain sense. What I generally found is when I try to dabble across sectors, I realize in private sector, things move faster because there's money. If you are too slow, you either get busted like Nokia, etc., or Kodak, even though you had the digital technology first, right? Or that's it. Whereas for governments, yeah, 5 years you get elected, provided it's a full democracy, they can elect you out. But otherwise, bureaucrats do not have a mirror that gives you a closed feedback loop, right? So that kind of implicates that kind of reinforces the behavior that Salvador, you were sharing about, whereby people just do whatever they want, right? I just do great in my silo, but I don't care about the other verticals or the horizontal because it's not my business. Bureaucrats don't get kicked out by elections, etc. Yeah, just some thoughts. Thank you.
All if I may, because there is some reflection that, sorry, Graham, that I can see that you were desperate to say something, but just going to make a small interruption. The first thing is that to give advice as an academic and then in the consultancy world, we have two levels here. For instance, if we build up on the micro foundations of research like Rian is doing with doing experiments at the level of individuals, so how they think, that is one way to try to help the practitioners how to deal with some issues that are relevant. So here we can have some convincing stories because we have to persuade them. It's about persuasion. So it is very sound what you do. And then now we have to make the story and to be persuasive when we tell them. But now that is easy. And I'm doing experiments myself about choice and preferences. Under work conditions, people choose private or public sector providers. Under work conditions, they prefer to go for vocational education or university. So if you do experiments, you can control the setting and you can be sure that at least you are going to understand some causal mechanisms. However, if you look at organizations, balancer scorecard, target regimes, that is impossible to do experiments with them. So then you need to find a way to frame a convincing picture that when you tell it, you say, you know what, this is a wonderful tool, but everyone else has implemented wrongly. Doesn't mean you are going to do it better, but try at least some of the philosophy. That is quite challenging because you cannot do good research as an academic here, sound research like in the micro foundations of Rian. And then you have to do a kind of qualitative research for which you have to be persuasive about it, right? And the second point is, during the pandemic, some bureaucrats have reacted very fast. Other bureaucrats are still there. So I think I would be reluctant to say private sector and public sector are different. It depends when and how, right? So that is but I think Graham wanted to say something, now he went. So he wasn't unhappy that I jumped in. So Graham wanted to say something, I think. Graham, the floor is yours.
Well, I think he's out.
He's out, okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, actually, I also have a question for Graham, because he mentioned that the innovation within the government, you just try it and then it can be, if it works, and then can be elevated to a higher level and can formulate some maybe formal programs. This is what I understand from his presentation, but from your own experiences, I don't know whether this could be a kind of top-down, because Charles just mentioned that top-down is not good, but I have a bit different views, because I think ideas, and of course we need to know citizens' preferences, and we want to innovate, but if you want to scale up innovations, you still sometimes you need a mixture of the hybrid approach, like you kind of bottom-up innovation, and then implementation, you need some top-down, resource allocation and top-down leadership for scaling up. Yeah, just my comment on Graham's presentation. And for Rian's presentation, Yes, it's very interesting. You mentioned this popularity. The popularity increases, right? When you have some, after they have this experiment. I don't know whether I understand correctly, but I'm interested in knowing that how it matters for the polarization of political attitudes, or not just the citizens. Sometimes within the institutions, you may have different views. Although within the government, usually we assume that civil servants, they may have similar attitude towards some policy, but in fact, it's not, right? Some civil servants are more conservative, other civil servants are more willing to change, right? So that's why I want to, it's very interesting, very foundational work, important work for us to study civil service motivation, for example, or, the feasibility or implementing reforms, as well as to understand to what extent the citizens can accept some reform initiatives. Because when you ask the public to evaluate government performance, oftentimes they have divided views. So is that anything to do the information or transparency? For example, the more information they get, the more maybe they are able to make some fair judgment or balanced judgment instead of more polarization. I wonder whether it's designed in your study, in your model. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Li Wei, for this question. So I think there's a couple of questions in what you mentioned. So first question is about polarization. I think the second question is about how do we then make use of this of the findings to drive change, whether is it in the citizens or within the public sector employees. So let me just answer the first question first. So the first question, in what I presented, we did not show the results for polarization, but because this is an agent-based model, it's a computer simulation, so we are actually able to observe many variables. So we do actually see polarization, and with regards to polarization, we do see one very interesting result. That's most of the time we think that extremists. So if we assume, just for the sake of discussion, extremists as an example of polarization. Now we will assume that it is because of close-minded people that leads to extremists. But the truth is that once you are close-minded, you are not going to be that easily influenced by other people. You are not going to have that many extremists. However, if your population has a mix, you still need the close-minded people, but it is the open-minded people who are continuously being able to be influenced. So depending on where they are in the social network, because of the continuous influence, and we make the simplistic assumptions, it is the open-minded people who allow themselves to be influenced repeatedly over time. So if we bring this to more empirical observations, if we look at regions, and sometimes you see that it is the people who allow themselves to be influenced that allows a religion or a group to occur. If they are close-minded, they wouldn't have allowed themselves. So when they come together, they mutually influence, and therefore chances are you actually see more extreme behaviors due to the open-minded people rather than the close-minded people.
Mm-hmm.
So this is one question in regards to polarization. So the other question is that how then do we apply the findings? I think one of the key things is that you would want to think about within the constraint where, from a social network perspective, naturally we want to target the nodes which has the highest number of degrees. But apart from that, we can also think about the people in terms of their need for cognitive closure. So under very simplistic assumptions, the results show that if you target people who are close-minded, and if you successfully convert them to believe in your opinion, then it is hard for them to sway away. So while they stay truthful to you, they will continuously spread the ideas.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, it is much more difficult to convince the close-minded people. So once again, the real world trade-offs there. Yeah. So in a case, this comes back to what Charles is mentioning and what Salvador and Graham mentioning. So it's definitely a very complex situation. It's a wonderful thing, at least from my point of view, that computational simulation allows us to explore many dimensions as opposed to pure psychological experiments, which is in a very pure world. So it allows us to explore many different, we can do scenario planning and so on. And if I will allow this little 1 minute to share my thoughts on what Charles and Salvador has mentioned, and also particularly what Graham has mentioned is about the narrow-mindedness of KPIs, right? Whether is it talking about OKR, it's about narrow-mindedness, and this comes and I do agree, because I come from the human resource area, so I do read a little bit, not too much, about public management. But one thing I realized in public management is that when they talk about human resource, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that they tend to take a functional silo point of view. Now, we mentioned about balanced scorecard, which is the whole of system point of view. Then from even during my so-called short consulting stint with human resource consulting company, I used to tell my colleagues, that yes, I understand when we sell a product, it depends on what the customer wants. But the truth is that, at least for performance management, if there's a problem, you don't need to deal with that problem using that tool. So for instance, if we have a narrow-mindedness performance management, you know that the best method is very hard to solve this problem. You need to continuously evolve. But let's just think about the example Charles gave about and Salvador gave about Google. It may be narrow-minded, but it's because of the selection. So you may have a very narrow-minded KPI, but your selection of people, if you select people who are not that driven, KPIs are highly effective to drive motivation, that we know. But the people can react differently. So if you select people who are self-driven, they don't really give too much of a concern to the KPIs. It does drive them, but they are concerned about other things. But if you select people who are very much focused on KPIs, or might I say there are studies to show intelligence do play a part. So if they are, slightly lower in less or just average intelligence, they may just focus on the KPIs. But if high intelligence, they're thinking more about what can they do for the company and thinking a few steps ahead rather than just KPI. So I think the solution is not just about, focusing on that function, but to look in a broader whole of systems point of view. And if you can't solve it using that, I think it's kind of okay. We can deal with it from another point of view.
Yeah, very nice. I agree. And do you have those how to say training or selection toolkits that will help human resource managers to select these people? Like do some survey, or I know some psychologists have some survey questionnaire, like not surveys, just questionnaires for like job candidates to fill in before they're selected. To identify their personality, whether they are open-minded or closed-minded. Do you already have this kind of?
I will not say I have.
Yeah.
In the public,
It's there.
I don't claim to have, but it exists. It does exist, and I think definitely I just embarrass myself, because I think we have a lot of public sectors experts over here. I think we are all very familiar with PSM, right? Public survey motivation. So that's one of the very easiest thing that we can assess people, and we can also do some longitudinal studies to see that maybe we have a hypothesis that after working in a certain ministries for 2 to 3 years, their PSM drop, and their PSM drop because of a certain context, because of the culture. You see, so PSM is just one, but there are just numerous tools and then neuropsychological tools we can assess that as well.
Okay, thanks.
Maybe I just add on, because I happen to be writing something on.
Sorry, one minute. Could we leave Graham talk? Because
Yeah.
I feel very bad. I feel very bad that I jumped in, so I'm sorry. I have to correct this.
Graham, you please go ahead first, because we missed you just now.
Yeah, I was dropped for a short while. I hope I'm okay now. I think the key point with all of the talk about things like balanced scorecard, all of the talk about consultants, and sorry, Charles, you're going into companies with models. These models, you've decided this model before you've even gone in to the company. It's just not right, the right way around. You have to look at the situation first. You have to do the situational appreciation. Are they operating in an orderly environment? Manufacturing, education. Often, a lot of these things are quite ordered environments. Are they operating in a complex environment? Salvador, politics, come on, it's complex. It's not ordered. Is it chaotic? Sometimes it is. You can't go in with a model and say, okay, balanced scorecard, this would work. No. You can go in with a concept, set of tools, and you think, right, well, which is the best tool to deal with this? And how do I need to change that tool for it to work? So Salvador, you mentioned about the British government, they wanted to impose a sort of a different framework. Well, the reason that the British government doesn't like that, or the civil servants don't like it, is because they don't trust these things coming in, because they've seen it all before. They come in as a prescriptive way of solving your problems, and all they do is layer another set of problems on top. This is the frustration I had 15, 20 years ago when I was doing this, going in and saying, well, all these systems, they're all snake oil systems that have come in that are supposed to work because they once worked for someone else. And I must say, I sort of put a lot of emphasis on Harvard Business School should take responsibility for a lot of these things, because they've been touting it for years and years and years, right? This is why I looked at Mintzberg and Quinn, because they were looking at the emergent stuff and logical incrementalism. We don't really have a plan yet. As the situation unfolds, then a plan will start to unfold too. So when you go in with a balanced scorecard, the reason we actually disjointed it was because that's the area we don't understand ourselves. We're never going to understand it. So just let it be. Let the people who might understand it at the front line work it out, and then see if that helps as it goes up the scale. So I think when you talk about systems, we're all intelligent people, right? We're all trying to work out the world, and we all try and design a model of what we're supposed to do. But actually, in a complex world, we don't know. The only way to know is to make it ordered, and in a lot of places you can't do that. You have to impose constraints on freedoms that are not going to work. So to me, I think it is actually rather simple that we don't ever, if we impose targets, then you're going to get dysfunctional behavior. People want to targets because they want that reassurance that you can be accountable for your performance, but you're not really accountable for your performance in a complex world. So you try and impose order. Look around the whole world now. People are free countries. They're not, you wouldn't dare tell someone that he can't have a Christmas with their family. Well, what's happening? It's chaotic. So you've got to impose restrictions. You try and look at these things from an ordered situation, complex situation, which is a lot of what we're talking about, complex situation, and the collapse into chaos if you don't apply the right kind of constraints. So all this performance management of the public sector ought to be, as Salvador absolutely rightly said, it's about dealing with the issues in the present. Okay, you do have targets, you do have some sort of implied target, even if it's not explicit, but you deal with the situation as it is, as you're facing it, and you deal with it with principles and with a kind of clever strategy of try things out, follow policies. If the policy's not working, review it. Why is it not working? Try experiments that are safe to fail. Okay. Anyway, that's my rant over.
Yeah, actually, Graham, I agree with you. I'm more a complexity agile type rather than a top-down, but I was just using to illustrate some of the fixated quantitative measurement stuff, etc. But really, I think we are talking about different layers. If you take the agile type, there will be the individuals that matter all the way to Riyang's micro level type, right? But then all of them aggregate up to the verticals, but the verticals across must talk, right? Together, also horizontally, etc. There is certain scope, but the question is, all of us do not know the unknown unknowns, right? So I mean, my consultancy work actually we are not McKinsey, so we cannot use, we don't just have a 7S and go around photocopying. We have to do, those who have no money and you get sued, you better do co-creation, go in and do the groundwork. So you look at data, from the data upwards, inductive manner, you see how to solve your problem. Whether it's OKR or balanced scorecard, etc., really depends on the situation. So it's more situational, etc. Right. So I think to an extent, also over to, I would say, the organizational psychology part, when we talk about psychometric, we have been talking about more intelligence type, personality, affective part, but no one has quite gone into the skills part of it. For example, is someone more predisposed because they think more algorithm type for tech jobs, for example? I mean, those I think are kind of new areas. But when you talk about the skills realm, etc., you are going beyond. You're going to the art side, the acumen side, where you can't quite measure in a very hard sense, in a certain sense. So it's that kind of gray area that we always kind of dabble on.
Okay, thanks for the very good discussion. Because of the time, we have to end this session. I'm really sorry for the chaotic arrangement, because the session 3, I think there's some problem about breakout rooms. Our original plan to break the session into 3 rooms, so each session can be held concurrently. But but anyway, we have presenter from session 3, Mr. Harold Yip. Mr. Harold Yip is our alumni, the CHK alumni. He's now the head of a company that is sustainability company. Actually, he's helping our university to recycle all the papers we produced. He's going to share us actually this policy in Hong Kong about recycling and the problem and challenges faced by Hong Kong. We welcome his presentation. Harriet, you have to unmute, yes. No, Harriet, we cannot hear you. No, Harriet, yes, okay.
Can you hear? Can you
now,
hear now?
now we can hear.
Yes.
Thank
And then,
you.
yeah, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I just want to share some ideas about the challenge of Hong Kong in terms of waste reduction. Well, this is the latest figures about the landfills, solid waste in our landfills. The latest figures just 2019. 2019 probably come next month, and then you can see that daily we have more than 11,000 what we call municipal solid waste. And then there are some other construction waste and special waste that we will focus on mainly MSW. And you can see that compared to last year, there has been an increase of more than 6.5%. And the biggest increase come from the commercial and industrial waste. In fact, from 2008 onward, the government, Hong Kong government has set a target to reduce the waste by 50% and in 2022, target to reduce the per capita waste from about 1.3 kg to about 0.8 kg. But in the past 10 years, you can see the trend that the volume is going up and up again, and now it's around 1.5 kg, and it's not likely to achieve 0.8 kg by 2022. And also is the problem of our recycling. And in 2001, before 2010, you can see that the recycling rate is going up almost 40% into peak at 2010. But afterward, it was it came down, and then it's now around just 36%. few percent in of recycling rate. So what happened? In fact, even the Hong Kong government, the audit commission, they criticized the performance of the recycling and now took the lead to investigate what happened now in Hong Kong. Well, when talk about recycling in Hong Kong, probably most people will just think about the situation, the sunlight that the old scavengers on the street, they collect waste paper. Well, that's Hong Kong situation. It's simply collection, pack, and then export. I always say that the recycling industry in Hong Kong is not really, is simply trading, not really a sustainable business. They buy low and then sell, but then we have some problem. I think this is the situation in 2017. The end of is around September in 2017. At that timing, because something happened, and then the major exporter of Hong Kong paper exporter, they stopped to collect paper waste, and then it resulted in paper surrounding the whole city. The same situation could be seen in many different places in Hong Kong. What happened this year? Well, this is what the industry called China earthquake, because 24 items being banned. Those are mainly plastics. And then the effect, not just affecting well, the effect, it was whole China. When China was the biggest importer for all kinds of waste before, no matter plastic and textile and papers. But then they banned it, plastic and paper, plastic and some textile and some scrap metal first. So all the European and US waste, they just shipped to Southeast Asia. But then the Southeast Asia side, they could not take more, and then they have to stop also. This resulted in a whole restructuring of the supply chain of the whole recycling industry, and in fact, plastic waste will be included in Basel Convention in 2021. That means this is no longer just a company-to-company practice, but more a country-to-country practice. Whenever you want to export waste plastic or you want to import waste plastic, you have to get the government permission. And last, well, we don't know what happened because it's just 2 weeks to go. PRC will totally ban waste paper import in 2021. PRC is the #1 waste paper importer in the world, and this will be a big impact for the whole world. And then we don't know what will be the situation now. When we talk about recycling industry, there are 2 characteristics. I always say that it's a local business, local practice, but global challenge, because yes, the collection is more like local practice, but when we talk about the sales of those recyclable waste, the pricing is just like commodity. Yeah. Worldwide, more or less the same. Talking like carton box, no matter in US, in Europe, and in Hong Kong, waste paper price is more or less the same. Like let's say like US dollar 130 per metric tons, and then you add the freight charge, everything, then you ship out. But yes, it's a commercial practice, but government policy. Government policy can also affect the pricing very much. What those government policy? Well, first is about the rubbish charge, municipal solid waste charging. In fact, in many countries in Europe, they have those MSW charging, even like gate charge for the landfills, and then producer responsibility scheme. You can say this is a taxation for those producers, let's say like PET bottle, or they have to be responsible for the recycling of those rubbish they produce. And then the government procurement policy, whether they place the emphasis on those recycled products, and then recycling fund, how the government make use of funding come from the MSW charging and producer responsibility scheme to subsidize or to help the whole recycling industry. And in Hong Kong's case, we now just have a paper export subsidy, a target because of the PRC ban of waste paper import. In fact, for Hong Kong, more than 98% of our recyclable waste export to China. In Hong Kong, there are some producer responsibility schemes being implemented. The first one is the plastic bags. Now you go to the supermarket, you need to pay 50 cents for one bag, plastic bag. And then the second scheme is the is related to the purchase of certain electrical equipments, including all air conditioner, refrigerators, washing machine, and then the computer. When the consumers buy those things, there was a there is a charge already included for prepared for the disposal of those items, and then the government for this the government built a plant in Eco Park in Hong Kong to handle those e-waste. The third one is glasses. We now have 3 contracts in Hong Kong for with 2 contractors to collect all glass bottles in the territory, and suppose all those no matter beer, wine, beverage importer, they have to pay about $1 for each bottle but the problem is for this glass glass contract, they can only collect around 25% of the waste in the landfills. Somehow is because of the problem of the design of the tender. Sorry. Well, I would like to share about the Taiwan experience, particularly on the rubbish charge, MSW charging. In fact, Taiwan in 2000, they implemented rubbish charge, and then within 10 years, they reduced the rubbish volume by 65%. That's why MSW charging so crucial in Hong Kong, but the problem is still on hold. More than a discussion for more than 20 years, still on hold. And then for Taiwan, the producer responsibility schemes, they got 14 items, totally 14 items being included in the producer responsibility scheme. So Hong Kong in a way is very in terms of policies is still very behind compared with Taiwan, South Korea, or of course Europe. And for when we talk about the recovery rate for recycling, what really matters? The EU study is about the higher environmental awareness is the most crucial point for increased correction rates. Okay, come back to the landfills statistic. When we talk about the Hong Kong waste, we're talking about 11,000 tons every day, and then the biggest volume of waste is food waste, more than 3,500 tons. The second one is paper, about 2,700 tons, and then followed by plastic is 2,300 tons. I want to take paper as an example because to me, I always say that paper is the most simple way, the simplest item to be recycled. You just make sure no paper in the rubbish bin, and then the recycling industry can take care of it. But you see that there are still a lot of papers in our in the landfills. Wow, I always wonder why Hong Kong people, in terms of recycling of papers, still very low compared with other countries. And then sometimes we concluded that because, well, everything just export, and then we don't know what happened. Just throw in the recycling bin, and then that's all. Okay. Well, how the recycling industry can change the situation? I just want to give an example of my experience, because we set up the Hong Kong first beverage cartons recycling pulp mill. This is the pulp mill. We also have an education center. When we talk about pulp mill for beverage cartons, I refer to those like Tetra Pak milk cartons, even the paper cups for coffee, soft drinks. In the past, they can only be disposed to the landfills, but cannot go to the paper recycling system. Why? Because the structure of those they are composite materials, not just contain papers. And Tetra Pak is the most complicated one with 6 layers. First layer is PE, paper, PE, aluminium, PE, and PE. Paper contribute around 75%, and then plastic PE 20%, and aluminium 5%. The normal paper mill, they cannot handle such this kind of beverage cartons. And then for paper cups or the milk carton, is talking about 5% PE and 95% paper. But more than that, somehow at the moment, many paper mills, they don't want to handle those paper that contaminated by food, and then they don't want to handle those what we call mixed paper, even like the core of the tissues, because they want to focus on the highest quality material, and of course even like the thermal paper. Well, in many countries it's just treated as rubbish, but in fact in EU already can be recycled provided they are BPA free. The problem is Hong Kong is, well, not just Hong Kong. I think most Asian countries behind US, Europe, and Japan, they already banned BPA, which is an environmental hormone. But in Hong Kong, the biggest supermarket chains, they still use non-BPA free thermal paper. So this is about mill. And then I just want to emphasize, I saw the photo, we have an education center. When we start this project, we think about that, well, this is the public confidence. In fact, the public confidence for recycling in Hong Kong is quite low. Or particularly, there are many news before. Well, when people dispose the PET bottle into the recycling bins, but well, in fact, they just dump it to the landfills. And then we want to build the confidence of the public, and we want our whole process to be so transparent, particularly for beverage cartons. In the past, people think that it's only rubbish. So that's why we build the education center for the public. And in fact, well, when we compare the school program that participate in helping us to recycle beverage cartons before and after visit, or whether they visit visit our center, the recycling does go up after visiting. Okay, the popping up. This is about the popping of the cartons. In fact, we use a popper and then to retrieve all those fiber, and then make use a drum, a rotary drum to separate all those plastic and aluminium. And then, after that, we have more filters to remove all those impurities, and then come out the pulp. This is the pulp, and then they are the raw materials for the for papers. And then, but to participate in this recycling, we need the consumers to cut, wash, and dry, and then send to us. Well, in fact, this is very difficult. Because most people, after drinking the beverage, they will just dump away. Hey, the problem is, we are not so convenient for them. And still, we insist on this way because this is the way, the Japanese way. The consumers, they have to bring back their rubbish back to their home, and then cut, wash, dry, and then go to the before sending to the collection points. And also because at the moment we don't have any support from because of no producer responsibility scheme. We have to work on a very low cost operation to ensure the whole our whole process sustainable. Well, this is our vision. We want to build a circular economy. For us, we focus on papers. And why we want to recycle paper better? Because for every ton of papers, you don't need to cut trees for recycled papers. No need to cut 24 trees compared to 1 ton of virgin paper. 33% energy less, and less 37% less carbon footprint, and then almost half reduce half the volume of water usage, and around 40% less solid waste, and of course less chemical waste. And a circular economy can help to reduce carbon emission by 40% globally. Yeah, in fact, I will only say that up till now, in the Mill opened just around 1 year, and then at the moment we collect around more than 1 ton of those beverage carton daily. And then the biggest achievement I would say that is about clean recycling. Our collection point, people worry about that. Many people worry about that. Those collection points will be just rubbish bin. But in fact, 95% of our collection from those bins are very cleaned. More than 95%. Yeah. So that's what I would like to share today. Thank you.
Thank you, Harold, for your very thoughtful preparation and spend up time on this. I actually really interested in this and appreciate your efforts. So I'm planning to organize some student study trips to Mill and to promote this kind of idea of recycling papers. So my question is how to make it easier for our ordinary citizens to contribute to the recycling. So like the paper cups, I just before the webinar, I just video recording. I prepared a short video teaching how to recycle the daily, the like paper cups or some. I thought the paper cups cannot be recycled, because I don't know. I thought, yes, the milk, like the drink box can be recycled by Miu Miu, but I don't know. Oh, the paper cups, like coffee cups, can also be recycled. So, but is it a way that maybe there's some, we can have some label or some logo to you know, to put on those paper products that people can know that it's recyclable. So because there's so many diverse different type of paper products, like for example, some of these some of the wrappings of cosmetics like facial mask. We put those facial masks in some you know, very shiny, like this one. I want to ask, it looks like it's a paper, but we really don't know. Like this one, it looks like there's some paper inside, but it's very shiny and looks like plastic. So I'm confused whether it's paper or plastic. And like this one, this is the paste cover. So this cover, it looks like you know, there's some metal element. But then if I you know, there's some looks like some paper in it, but then it also looks like a plastic. So it's like a mixture of plastic or metal and maybe some paper. I don't know whether this one is recyclable. So I have numerous questions about like this one. Is this recyclable? You know, we have all these snacks, a lot of wrappings. So is this recyclable? How can we help? Yeah, so can you help me to answer these questions?
Okay. Well, first, at the moment, because of the PLC, they in fact even before they banned the paper import next year, they limited the volume of paper import to China, and then that's why the recycle industry, even the Hong Kong government, just promote on the collection of three paper types only. Those paper types is carton box, newsprint, and then newspaper, and then office papers. But then there are a lot of what we call mixed paper. I mentioned before. There are now no market now. Now that's a problem, and Miu Miu can recycle it. And then other item, because for the packaging industry, they are now making use of more and more what we call composite materials, not just paper, but also plastic or even like aluminium. And sometimes we need to study before we can say that whether we can handle it or not. In fact, in Europe, in Germany, there has been now a packaging rule. All the consumer goods, all the supermarkets, whenever they introduce a product, sell a product, they need to ensure whether those packages can be recyclable or not. And in our case, we are now trying to in fact, we try to work with some. We're trying to work with some business partner now that we put a logo for Miu, similar to Miu Miu, and then let the consumers to know that all those things can be handled by us. In fact, they are there has been a company manufacturing paper straw. They make use of our logo to let the consumers know that those paper straw can be recycled. We are working on this.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, indeed. That's very important and appreciate. But you know, the consuming market is so huge, even in a small city like Hong Kong. So I really hope more people can join you and can, you know, the government and also the business sector, they can you know, be more, you know, be more aware of the problems and to contribute resources to this kind of R&D and to change the business model and the management processes. to take into account the need of recycling, the consideration of recycling before they produce something new, right? So yeah, Ryan, do you have anything to comment? No. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I just want to thank Hera for this very interesting presentation. I'm just going to make one comment and going to ask Hera one question. And I'm going to be very honest to say that my question is very selfish. I'm going to explain why. So I'm just going to give a comment. I think it's very interesting, especially what Li Wei just now, the questions. I think from the research point of view, it might be interesting to assess cross-country differences. I wouldn't say cross-cultural, it's definitely cross-country, cross-national differences. Because I think from a Singapore, so Hong Kong and Singapore, we are always kind of similar in many ways. I think in Singapore, when we deal with this kind of, at least from my sample size, is that when we think of paper, we assume a lot of paper can be recycled. And I'm thinking, like those with plastics, no problem, it can be recycled. We don't even question about it. It can be recycled. It's very intuitive for us. And I think one possible reason is because when it comes to recycling, it is top down. It is from the government as opposed to a private enterprise. And as such, it might there might be some confounding with trust in government. So especially for public sector research, without trust in government is definitely one very strong variable to mention. So perhaps it is because of this trust in the trust in government as a moderator that actually affects our perception whether simple things like paper can be recycled. This is a lazy mentality of Singaporeans. I can say that now because I think I'm the only Singaporean here. Yeah. But the other question I have for Hera is that it's selfish because I do not know what is happening with the recycle thing. I'm very intrigued. I've heard about it. So is there a reason why China is the biggest importer of waste paper and they recycle? And is there a reason why is there a change in direction? I know this is a very simple question, but I'm really dumb on this. So please enlighten.
Okay. Well, I answer your first question first because, well, in fact, for Hong Kong, for the part, I always say that there was no policy. There was no policy about rubbish. No MSW charging, the producer responsibility scheme so laid back, and then compared, well, in the past, the whole industry, we just rely on the because of the prosperity of the China economy, and then they look for raw materials. So we don't need the government help in the past. I mean, well, back to 5 years ago, and then even the quality of our waste paper may not be good, or may contain a lot of rubbish. The same situation from other countries. All those waste just shipped to China. They ask for raw materials. That's it. And then but okay. So the Hong Kong situation, the government never in the I mean back to 5 years ago, no support, no special policy for the whole recycling. They just talk about waste reduction, and then they want this to happen, but nothing happened. Just education. Okay, so that's the problem for Hong Kong compared with Singapore. And then there's no trust, because once the plastic, the PET, the pricing going down together with the drop of oil prices, and then all the PET in Hong Kong just go to the landfills. No. The second question, in fact I mentioned a bit about China. Well, with China economy growing rapidly, they becoming the world factory, and then they export a lot. For export, they need packaging. That's why, in fact, China is still the #1 paper manufacturer in the world. And then for paper, waste paper, it now contribute more than 60% of paper making. That's why China is also the #1 waste paper importer. But because of the pollution problem, and then they already announced in 2017, and then they now well, they want 2021 to cut all those imports. But in fact, this is a really planned economy, and then I don't know what would be the situation, because ideally they think that the China within China they can collect sufficient volume for recycling for the paper industry, but this is not the situation, because for recycling rate in China is very high, right? Because many low-income people, they just even go to the landfills. Those landfills are illegitimate landfills, to collect all those paper waste and sell it, and so the recycling rate already very high, and then most important, most of the papers being exported. Right? We don't know what happened on well, next year, or maybe because for the whole the change in the whole industry, for paper making industry, for a paper mill, it will take 3 years to build, and then so we don't know in the coming 2 years it will be some chaotic situation worldwide for the waste paper for the whole recycling industry.
Mm-hmm. So what's your worry? I mean, because I read some video showing that actually those people who to collect this waste and to recycle it actually develop some technology. They invest in some machines to recycle plastic and to make some t-shirts using those recycled plastic. So it seems like this could be actually from a low end, kind of business develop into a more technology intensive industry.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Yes, yeah. But you are talking about the end side. I mean, because for recycling, the first one is the collection size, and collection is still very many. I mean, it really depends on the individual behavior of everyone. You have to put all those recyclable,
Yes.
and you have to clean all those recyclable before you put in the recycling bin.
Yes.
So that you have to change you have to ensure the behavior combining and and then after that, then you have the volume for the production. Technology is one thing, and well, even like our mill, is innovative in Hong Kong, because we handle all those before it's rubbish. Now going, well, it is technology. Many technology already exists. Just the point is how to collect. I mentioned about for our volume. Well, daily, the landfill got around 67 tons of beverage cartons, but we now still collect just around less than 2 tons, 1.1 ton, more than 1 ton. Yeah.
Graham, do you have something to say?
Yeah, Harold, very, very interesting, Harold. I'm intrigued, because to me, if you look at the concept of a system, then you need principles to that system for it to sustain itself. Now, with waste, if effectively your system is to export your waste, give your rubbish to someone else,
yes,
then that's a tragedy of the commons eventually going to happen. You can't, not everyone can give their waste to everyone else. So we're giving our waste, or Hong Kong's giving its waste to the mainland, and the mainland is siphoning off the good bits, but then there's waste from the bad bits, the bits that you can't deal with, and that's not sustainable. So I see I can see where the mainland's concept is, that you can't have this whole system that ends up with the mainland accepting both the good and the bad of other people's waste, and then them just building up the waste of the reproduced waste, or the recycled waste. So to me, it's almost a moral point for Hong Kong to say our aim is to deal with our own waste like an adult should. And that should be the long-term government's goal. And it should be stated, we shouldn't export any waste from Hong Kong to anyone at all. We should deal with it ourselves. Now that as an ecology, that as an ecology is not going to fit with the propensity of the public, which is we throw our waste away. Our waste isn't our problem, it's someone else's problem. That's the propensity of Hong Kong's people. So I can understand exactly why the government's focus is on education, because the real problem can't be solved with the propensity of the public. It has to change the propensity of the public. To clash with the propensity of the public is exactly what's been happening in the last couple of years. There's a clash with the propensity. So you have to either change the propensity or put draconian measures in place or put a principle in place. Now, if you said to Hong Kong people, take care of your own waste, it ain't going anywhere, it's not going anywhere, there are no options, then you've at least got this sort of realization that, okay, we better start dealing with it.
Yeah.
I'm a sort of radical that I believe that anything that's sold to you should be sold to you at the cost of its full recycling value, full recycling cost. That's a radical position. But I think in principle, that comes from, you know, a project doesn't finish when you sell the good. The project finishes when that good is finally reabsorbed into the ecology. So this whole concept of looking at waste as part of an overall system for Hong Kong and for the world is this acceptance that the waste we produce, we should have to deal with. That's my view anyway.
Yeah. In fact, the polluters pays principle should be set up. That's why we need the MSW charging and the producer responsibility scheme in place. But okay, too long in Hong Kong. Well, we have been waiting too long.
Yes, and what if I just have a suggestion while we're waiting for those regulations? Maybe we can, is that possible to develop some robots to sort the waste and to classify it and help with the recycling? Because now the AI technology seems to be developing, and it will also minimize the harm on public health. You know, can we even recover those wastes from the landfill and sort it? I don't know whether it's possible.
Okay, I don't know. I really don't know. But I just in fact, for waste collection system, there have been two main streams. One is what we call the one stream. Just separate the dry waste and then the wet waste, and then the dry waste go to those big soft like big factory, and then they will use different technologies to separate all those paper, metals, and plastic. And then the other way is just like Japan, Europe. Everyone, they have the responsibility to separate all those waste at the source. And then from waste reduction point of view, and for all those studies, regarding waste reduction, the later one, that means the separation of waste from the sources is the most successful one, compared with the one stream in. That's why we still believe that at the beginning, everyone has the responsibility to separate all those recyclable waste.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Because it's already very late, Harold. But
Okay.
I think our discussion is very good. Maybe you can develop a paper or maybe a book chapter out of your presentation. We can publish it. To educate more people. I still think education is still very important.
Yes. Yeah. Education still is a must.
Yeah. Okay.
Agree.
Thank you very much, and thank other audience participation and the contribution to today's webinar. So let's keep in contact and wish you a good week.
Okay.
Bye bye. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye bye.